Education is the key. They said, go to school. But why are so many graduates purposeless and jobless? On EduShift, we spot the cracks. We challenge the educational system. Torn between science, arts, and commerce, we bring clarity and answers to your questions, and we light up the path for a generation ready to stand out. Come enjoy discussions with educators, employers, and counselors. Let us fix this problem of career misalignment and help you discover yourself. EduShift, only on Global TV.
What does your child learn before they get to school? I'm not talking about mathematics. I'm not talking about English, and I'm not talking about multiplication tables or how to write an examination. I'm talking about the lessons that happen without a teacher standing in front of a classroom. The lessons a child learns by watching, by listening, and by experiencing, by observing how adults around them communicate. Hello and welcome to EduShift, where we help you shift towards education that aligns with purpose. I am your host, Priscilla Obasi, and we're going to be discussing something quite sensitive today. We're talking about the home as a classroom, how the atmosphere at home can influence a child's learning. Now, I started by asking what your child learns by observing, how you handle disagreements, and how you respond to mistakes. How you also talk about education, how you treat people. Because long before a child enters a classroom, the home has already become their first classroom. And the parents, whether they realize it or not, are the first teachers of a child. Let me tell you a story about a boy called Daniel. Now, Daniel was 11 years old, and at school, his teachers described him as intelligent, but they also described him as easily distracted. Daniel struggled to concentrate. He rarely completed his assignments. Sometimes he came to school without his homework. The teacher would always ask why he didn't do his assignment, and Daniel would simply shrug. Now, one afternoon, the teacher called his mother. She was understandably concerned, and she asked, I don't understand this boy. At home, he refuses to read. And she said, I don't understand this boy. At home, he refuses to read. He's always on phone, on the tab, and he doesn't listen. The teacher decided to observe Daniel more carefully, and eventually, she noticed something about Daniel. Daniel wasn't simply struggling academically. He was tired, as a matter of fact, very tired. At home, his parents were constantly arguing. Sometimes they argued late into the night. Sometimes they stopped speaking to each other for days. Sometimes Daniel heard one parent complain about the other. And sometimes, in the middle of an argument, someone would say, these children are the reason I can't leave this marriage. Now imagine being 11 years old and carrying the sentence, that very sentence, into your mathematics classroom. The teacher began to understand something. Daniel wasn't sitting in class thinking about subjects in class. He was thinking, how will my parents be able to get our home together? Will my parents still be together when I get home? Those are most times his questions or his thoughts. He wasn't worrying about his homework. He was worrying about what might happen that evening when he gets home. He wasn't necessarily being lazy. Daniel was occupied in his mind, and this is where today's conversation becomes important. Sometimes we look at the child's academic performance without looking at the environment in which that child is trying to learn. The home is teaching all the time. A child watches their mother struggle with something. When she says, I can't do this, or it's difficult, but I'll keep trying. A child makes a mistake. Does the parents say, what's wrong with you when a child makes a mistake? Or let's understand what happened and try again. A child, when maybe asks a question, or when he asks or she asks a question, what's your response to that child? Do you tell them they're asking too many questions? Or do you just try to find out why they are asking the question? Now, this moment may seem small, right? But they are actually educational. Children are constantly building about themselves and the world based on what they see and what they hear, and the encouragement you also give to them. Home teaches children things that may never appear on a school timetable. And the earlier we realize this, the better for us. It teaches them how to communicate, it teaches them how to handle conflict with themselves, with children around them, with their classmates. It also teaches them how to respond to failure. It teaches them how to treat people. Whether asking questions is safe or not, whether mistakes are part of learning or not, whether their voice matters or not, whether education is valuable or not. Home teaches children that learning is something, they can either fear or be excited about. And all of that happens with their daily activities that they see. Now, let's bring this conversation home. In many Nigerian families, education is taken really serious. Parents make enormous sacrifice, to pay school fees, to buy uniforms, to buy books. Children are transported to and fro from school. Parents work long hours to provide all the opportunities, and that sacrifice really deserves recognition. But sometimes, without intending, we communicate a very different message to our children, and a child, comes home with 85% of all of those. Now, when your child performs good in class, our response shouldn't be to compare them to the best of the best, which, I totally understand that we want our children to come out best. But all of those comparisons, kind of affects them too. Well done. Let us see where you can improve on. These are things your children should hear from you, right? Rather than, 85% is not enough. When they keep hearing those things, it discourages them. Over time, that child may stop seeing learning as discovery, or they start to see learning as, performance, something they can have to put up for you to approve of. Education becomes a constant attempt to prove to them, a constant attempt to validate themselves to you. It makes the home a place of fear. Now let's talk about something quite uncomfortable. A child cannot always separate emotional life from academic life. Yes, if your home is constantly filled with, constant shouting, threats, humiliation, unpredictable discipline, intense conflict, excessive pressure, a child's emotional state can be affected. And it also affects how they engage with learning. So it doesn't mean that every child comes from a difficult home environment will perform poorly, but children are remarkably resilient. But it's also not about blaming parents. Parenting is difficult, if we must admit. Many parents themselves are dealing with a lot of pressure, work stress, relationship challenges, and the responsibility that comes with all of that. It can really be overwhelming. So the point is not to bash parents, to say parents must create a perfect home. There's no perfect home, in my opinion. The goal is to create a home where children experience enough safety, consistency, connection, and encouragement to grow and learn. You must put in the effort to make sure your inadequacies, can be supported with the right attitude towards your child. As usual on EduShift, we highlight counseling theories that best supports the message we're trying to push. And this brings us to our counseling theory for today's episode. It's called the Albert Bandura's theory. Now, Bandura's social learning theory is particularly useful when we talk about home as a classroom, because his work emphasizes something very simple. Now, Bandura says people learn by observing others, especially children. He also explained observational learning theory, through 4 key processes. The first is attention. A child notices what the important people around them are doing. And by important persons, I mean their parents. Then We go to retention. The child remembers what they have observed. Then we go to reproduction. The child eventually imitates that behavior. And finally, motivation. If the behavior appears to be rewarded, the child becomes more likely to repeat it. So, the four processes are: number one, attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. Now, let's make that real. Imagine a father who constantly says, "I hate reading, books are boring." But he tells his child, "You must read every day." What is the child learning? The instruction says reading is important, right? But the model says reading is boring. Which one is more powerful? What the child is watching, of course. Now, imagine a mother who makes a mistake and says, "Oh, I made a mistake, let me try again." Her child actually learns mistakes can be corrected. Now imagine another child whose parents reacts to every mistake with, "How many times will I tell you, you never get anything right?" The child may begin to associate mistakes with shame. Now both children are receiving education, different kinds of education. So parents, let's ask ourselves, what does your child or what does your home communicate about learning? What does your child see? Does your child actually see you reading? Does your child see you asking questions? Does your child hear you say, "I don't know, let me find out"? That is a powerful sentence, as trivial as it may seem, because it teaches humility and curiosity at the same time. Your child learns that adults don't have to know everything. They simply need to remain willing to learn. Education is not only what we say. Sometimes parents say, "I always tell my children to respect people." But if your child watches your parent, if your child watches you disrespect, insult your domestic workers, what lessons are you teaching? Do not lie. You keep saying to your child, but your child watches you lie to avoid answering a phone call. You tell your children to protect or control their anger, but your child watches the parent explode whenever something goes wrong. Children don't only listen to our instruction, they study our behavior, and sometimes our lifestyle is the loudest lesson in the house. Now, what about academic performance? Suppose your child is struggling in mathematics. Before immediately saying, "This child is not serious," ask questions. Does your child understand the work? Is the child getting enough sleep? Does the child have a quiet place to study? And are there constant distractions? Is the child afraid of making mistakes? Does the child know how to study? Is there conflict in the home? Do the child feel excessively pressured? These questions don't excuse poor performance. They help us understand it actually. And there is a difference between understanding a problem and excusing a problem. Now, a quiet home is not necessarily a healthy home. And I'm not saying this to say, "Oh, your home has to be quiet and, calm all the time." No. When we talk about atmosphere, we don't simply mean whether the house is quiet or not. A house can be actually quiet and still be emotionally cold. A child may have all the food, have all their school fees paid, have all their clothes clean. Everything may look perfect from the outside, but the child may never hear, "How are you doing? I'm proud of your effort. Tell me what happened today. I made a mistake too." Emotional connection actually matters. The question every parent should ask, instead of asking, "Is my child doing well?" What does a learner, what kind of learner is my child becoming at home? Is your child becoming curious, responsible, confident, afraid, dependent, resilient, honest? Does your child believe they can learn? Does your child believe mistakes are allowed? Does your child believe their voice matters? Are they educational questions too? If your home is a classroom, what exactly should we be teaching there? Can parents create a home, atmosphere that supports learning without turning the house into another school? Practically. And what can a parent do when the home itself is under pressure? Not every home again has the luxury of a quiet house. Not every parent has unlimited time. Not every home is financially comfortable. Not every marriage is peaceful, sadly. Not every parent knows how to communicate properly. So the solution shouldn't be create a perfect home. That's not what we're saying. The solution has to be practical. It has to work in real Nigerian homes. The home as a classroom. How the atmosphere at home influences a child's learning. Right? Okay. So this is what we're discussing today. And remember, we're having all these conversations to create lasting solution. Again, a child's education does not begin when they walk through the school gates. It begins at home. We talked about Daniel, the 11-year-old boy, right, whose academic performance was being affected by emotional atmosphere around him. And we've also used the Albert Bandura's social learning theory to understand how children learn by observing the people around them. Now, let's move from understanding the problem to finding the solution. Because at EduShift, we don't simply tell parents, this is what you're doing wrong. We actually want to ask, what can we do differently? And I want to start with something very important. Parents, please hear this. You don't need a perfect home to raise a child who loves learning. You don't need a mansion. You don't need a personal library. You don't need to be a professor. You don't even need to know answers to all questions. What children need is an environment that consistently communicates you are safe to learn here. You are allowed to ask questions. You can make mistakes and try again. Your education matters. I believe you can grow. This is something almost every family could begin to build. Let's start with to creating a culture of questions. Now, somewhere along the line, many children become afraid of asking questions. They don't want to appear ignorant, and they don't want their classmates to laugh at them. They don't even want their teachers to think they are not paying attention enough. Sometimes that fear begins at home. A child asks, "Mommy, why is the sky blue?" Sounds really annoying sometimes, especially when you've gone through all the stress. And then you parents with the anger response, "Go and read your book." Now, sometimes the parent is actually busy, right? And I understand that. But imagine occasionally responding, "This is a good question. I don't know either. Let's find out." Don't you know what you've just taught that child? Not just science, you've taught them curiosity is valuable. Now let's separate the child from the result. Your child is not the examination score. That is another thing we should teach our children. Let me say this again. Your child's result is information about their learning and not a definition of their worth. If your child gets a 45% in mathematics, the question you should ask isn't why are you so dull? The better question to ask is, what part did you find difficult? You're solving a problem. Maybe they don't understand fractions. Maybe they missed a fundamental and foundational concept. Maybe they need another explanation. Maybe they need more practice. Maybe they understand the concept but struggle with time. Maybe the score, should help you diagnose the learning they actually need. It should not become a weapon that you use against them. Now, the third solution is praise effort with strategy. Let's go back to Carol Dweck's work on mindset for a moment. Now, Dweck's research popularized the distinction between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. A fixed mindset tends to interpret ability as something static, like "I'm just not good at mathematics." A growth-oriented approach says, "I don't understand this yet." Now, that little word "yet" can make a huge difference. Parents can reinforce this at home. Instead of saying "you're not so intelligent," try sometimes, "I noticed how hard you work on that." Or, "You didn't understand it at first, but you kept trying." Or, "Your strategy worked better this time." We want children to understand the ability, to develop. Now, children learn through observation. So parents, let your children see you learning. You don't have to sit down with a textbook for 3 hours. It could be reading a newspaper, learning a new skill, watching an educational program, asking someone for help, learning how to use technology, taking a course, and even saying, "I don't know how to do this, let me learn." The home is a classroom. That is where the child starts to learn from. Your reaction to their inabilities, their inadequacies, ultimately determines what they make of their academics. And the way you respond to their learning process too also determines what they make of it eventually in the classroom. So please, before we close, I want to give parents something practical. This week, ask yourself, does my child feel safe talking to me? Does my child know that mistakes are part of learning? Do I praise effort, improvement, and good strategies, and not only high score? Does my child have enough time for sleep, play, study, and family connection? Do I model the behavior I expect of my child? Do I listen, or do I label? Do I communicate with my child's teacher enough? Does my child know that their academic performance does not determine their worth? You don't have to get all. Just start with one. Ask your children this. Thank you so much for joining us on EduShift. Until I come your way next time, I still remain your host, Priscilla Obasi, and bye for now.
It's edutainment time on EduShift.
If your younger ones beat you and you go and tell them, they will beat you back. So that anger makes you go and beat your younger ones. What kind of discipline is that? They keep saying our generation is false. Every 5 minutes, they'll say, when I was your age, when I was your age, when I was your age. When I was your age, I went to fetch water from the moon and fight lions on my way to school. If you love those days of trekking to school so much, why are you driving a Lexus to work? We are not the problem. Our generation is not the problem.
School of fish, a pair of scissors.
I have heard about grown-ups who have been hung on doors or fans and have been flogged mercilessly just because they went out to play football and came back late. A child wakes up in the morning, no routine, no structure, and they go out to play. After they come back, you beat them. Like, it's not fair. Our parents always say that you guys are so spoiled. You guys are so spoiled. In my days, I used to get 24 sticks of cake. Before, when they said that, I actually thought that they were just trying to scare us, like traumatize us. You know, just very normal too. The school I was in before this, we were flogged like cows. That is not what you should be calling discipline. That's just torture. I'm telling you. Yeah. Some were flogged so much that they couldn't tell their parents about abuse and stuff.
Do you love me?
I'm trying to protect you.
Do you love me?
I cannot. We cannot. This conversation isn't.
How can you call flogging a kid with wires and cutting them with a blade discipline? Discipline isn't punishment. It's discipline is telling you to do what's right. And what you're trying to tell us is discipline is torture.
Bring sharp class here. That's what they don't cause. We won't take an act drama.
Once a time that my aunt was just coming to the assembly, and for some reason they told all of them to kneel down, and before they would come out of the assembly ground, they had to collect 2 strokes of cake. For what? That sounds harsh. Anyways, that sounds harsh. Millennials are a bunch of envious people.
God, I give you glory, I give you email.
She's looking, well done. She's looking her partner in the eyes. Well done, great job.
The human eyes are a powerful tool for connection and communication.
Now, don't look away. Look your partner in the eye. Don't look away.
Unfortunately, kids nowadays stare more into the screen than into the eyes of other people.
Smile, where is your smile? You jump, look at your partner, don't look away. Well done, don't look away. If you look away, you're out of the gate. Oh, you looked away.
Low self-esteem and insecurity are part of the root causes of eye contact avoidance or fear.
Say something about yourself, but don't break eye contact with the person you're talking to.
At Nothing Else Morrissey, we are trying to shift the attention of our focus from just pronunciation to basic communication skills, to self-confidence, to self-worth, to telling kids that they have voices for a reason and that their voices matter.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dara Johnson.
We want to teach them to share their voices, share their opinions, to know that whatever they have to say really does matter.
Just keep looking at that person. Tell them what you love about yourself. Speak about yourself.
How you sound is important. but how you feel about yourself is way more important.
Education is the key. They said, go to school. But why are so many graduates purposeless and jobless? On EduShift, we spot the cracks. We challenge the educational system. Torn between science, arts, and commerce, we bring clarity and answers to your questions, and we light up the path for a generation ready to stand out. Come enjoy discussions with educators, employers, and counselors. Let us fix this problem of career misalignment and help you discover yourself. EduShift, only on Global TV.